Hi, welcome back. We're still in ACT English test. Remember, that's always section 1 of your ACT. And we got a bunch of different passages that we're looking through, figuring out some of the grammatical errors, some of the stylistic errors, and trying to improve these paragraphs based on the questions that they give you. Now, today we're going to talk a little about redundancy. Redundancy is a word you might have heard before. What it means generally is that you have two things doing the work of one thing. Now, when we talk about redundancy for the purposes of the ACT, basically you have to ask yourself, for any given question, does this extra amount of language, do the extra words give me extra information? Or are the extra words simply repeating information that's already there? So we have a couple of classic cases of redundancy, but it can come up in a lot of different ways, and some of them can be kind of sneaky. So we're going to take a look at a lot of different questions, and remember, it's tested pretty heavily on the ACT. Almost every passage has some redundancy questions. So let's take a look at what redundancy is. It is very heavily tested on the ACT. Comes up all over the place, and sometimes it's not the main point of the question. Sometimes it's just used in one of the wrong answer choices. So in other words, the redundancy occurs in the answer choice that you're not supposed to pick. Maybe the real question is actually testing something else. Maybe in the real question, you need to know where to put the comma, or you need to know what pronoun to use, and they just throw in a redundancy into one of the wrong answer choices. Good news and bad news about that. Good news is, that tells you what the wrong answer choices are. Once you get practice in identifying redundancies, once you can realize that they don't help the sentence, it just gives you another piece of ammunition to take out those wrong answer choices. And that's what we're looking for. More and more reasons to cross out the wrong answer choices. So this is one of the things that comes up a lot, not always a main point of the question, comes up a lot in the wrong answer choices. Redundancy can be sneaky. Be on the lookout for shorter sentences and fewer words. So what do I mean by that? When you look at a bunch of answer choices and you see one of them is just one word and all of the other ones are much longer, think to yourself, what are those extra words? So redundancy, what we're talking about is extra words, and we'll see some examples really shortly. But we're talking about extra words with redundancy, so whenever you see the answer choices and two of them are really long, one of them is really short, ask yourself, what are all those extra words doing in there? Do I need them? Are they adding information, or are they just duplicating information? Is it redundant? Now, the answer is not always it's redundant. Plenty of times they are adding information, and we'll see the flip side of that on our relevancy lesson. Sometimes it's adding very strong, good, relevant information. So you have to be on the lookout and ask yourself, what just got added? But in general, you're looking for questions where the answer choices are different by length. And some of them are much longer and some of them are much shorter. And we're asking ourselves, do the extra words help? All right, let's take a look at a couple of examples. When two parts of the sentence play the exact same role. Now, what do we mean by the exact same role? It can be two things. We'll see that in a minute, but in general, it can be the same meaning. Let's take a look here. We have our annual picnic once a year. Maybe you caught that right away. There's no grammatical error here. It's a perfectly good grammatical sentence. What's the error? The error is that annual means the exact same thing as once a year. Annual and once a year mean the same thing. And I know you're thinking, but doesn't it clarify? We have our annual picnic once a year. Maybe it's not always. No, if it's not always annual, then it would be biannual or semi-annual or infrequent or something like that. So annual means the same thing as once a year. The once a year doesn't have anything to do in the sentence, or the annual doesn't have anything to do in the sentence. Either of them could be right. You could say we have our picnic once a year, or we have an annual picnic. Both would be totally fine. So for questions where redundancy is being tested, most of the time, either one will work, but you have to pick one. You can't use both. So this would be okay. Sure, we can get rid of once a year. Maybe we would change this to an. That's one way to fix this. Or, alternatively, we could leave in the once a year and just get rid of annual. We have our picnic once a year. Now, generally, for the ACT, the shorter one is going to be the one to choose. So if you're down to annual or once a year, annual is more concise. It's really good to get the idea in one word rather than three. This is 3 words. This is 1 word. If you have a choice between 3 words in 1 word in a redundancy question, go with 1 word. In general, fewer words are better. Both Chad and also Tom enjoy soccer. Now this one, both Chad and also Tom enjoy soccer. This one is a little stranger. This one seems, maybe it sounds wrong, but is it really redundant? And what's redundant in here? I'll tell you. It doesn't seem like it at first, but when you think about it, and also, what does also do there? And also, how does also help the sentence? And look over here, we have both. So we have both and. Now, we'll learn in our diction lesson, both and always go together. Both and always go together. So I could say Chad and Tom enjoy soccer, or I could say both Chad and Tom enjoy soccer, but the also is what's out of place here. I know it's also Tom. That's why I said and. The also doesn't tell me any information. So this is a case of a more grammatical sort of redundancy. These words simply can't be used together. They shouldn't be used together. In general, one rule, if you have the choice between and another word that means basically the same thing as and, choose and. So if you see things like both Chad and in addition Tom enjoy soccer, ask yourself, that in addition, that also, what does it help? How does it add anything to the sentence? If you cross it out and you think, you know what? The meaning didn't change. I'm not given any more clarity. That's your big mark there. Are things made more clear? Do you understand more because of this use? If the answer is no, think redundancy and think you should get rid of the extra words. Now we have 2 basic types of redundancy. And these aren't clear dividing lines. This is a basic way to think about them. One type of redundancy is grammatical. You have 2 parts of the sentence and they perform the same grammatical function. Now we just saw that over here. And also perform the same grammatical function. Some slightly more nuanced examples. When you use more than one method of joining clauses and phrases, this gets tested all the time. So here, although she is very strong, but she has trouble controlling her strength. Now you probably heard right away, that wasn't a good sentence. It didn't sound right. There's tons of ways to talk about why this is wrong. One is we can talk about sentence fragments. Each one of these is a sentence fragment. And when we get to our sentence fragment lesson, we'll understand more about that. Each one of these is a dependent clause. So we don't have an independent clause, so this is not a sentence. Why is it not a sentence? It's not a sentence because the although and the but, they're both used to link clauses. They're both used to link clauses. Now if I have 2 clauses here, and I do, I only need 1 link between them. And now I have 2. So in other words, I could say, although she is very strong, she has trouble controlling her strength. Or I could say, she is very strong, but she has trouble controlling her strength. Either one will be fine. There's no preference here. Either one will be great. I can't have them both. So I can do this. That would be great. Or I could do this. That would be great. And this is an example of grammatical redundancy. This happens a lot with conjunctions. And we'll talk about that in our conjunctions lesson. But on the whole, be on the lookout for 2 words in a sentence that join 2 parts of a sentence in the same exact way. Okay, now the second type of redundancy is redundancy in meaning. Redundancy in meaning is when you use more than 1 word or more than 1 phrase to convey only 1 meaning. And we saw that over here with our annual picnic once a year. We had the phrase once a year. It means it happens once every 365 days. The word annual means it happens once every 365 days. They mean the same thing. So let's take a look at a slightly more nuanced example. The ancient parchment was unique in being the only one of its kind. The ancient parchment was unique in being the only one of its kind. This one's a little subtler. What's being tested here? The word unique means there's only one of them. The word unique means there's only one of them, so it's redundant to say it was unique in being the only one of its kind. Those mean the same things. So what could I say? I could say the ancient parchment was the only one of its kind. Or I could say the ancient parchment was unique. Either one would be fine, but this is a redundancy in meaning. Now, there is some overlap here with what these words mean and how to understand them, and that'll come up in our diction lesson. So when we talk about diction and idioms, we'll talk about how to use these words, when to use them, what they do mean and what they don't mean, and how they sometimes get confused. But for now, whenever you have two words, or a word in a phrase, or two phrases, ask yourself, does the extra one help? Does the extra one help? Now, right now you're probably asking yourself, how do I tell if the extra one is extra or not? How do I tell what's left out or what's in? That's great. That's where the answer choices help you. So when you're comparing answer choices and you see one is really long, look at what's added. Look at the difference between B and C. If you see there's a phrase in B and that phrase is not in C, ask yourself, do I need that phrase? Does the phrase add meaning? Does it add clarity? So these are the things we're going to be thinking about as we jump into some of our questions and take a look at how redundancy actually comes up on the ACT.